Welcome. You're watching IndiaPostLive.com. All of us want entertainment all the time. Several filmmakers and film studios have resorted to adapting books into films. Let's take a quick look at some of them.
Is he amiable?
Is he handsome? He's single.
Films based on books have been made since the beginning of cinema. Classics such as Pride and Prejudice, Jane Eyre, Frankenstein were adapted into films decades ago. Mario Puzo's The Godfather, made in 1972, remains a cult classic. Popular books such as A Time to Kill, the Harry Potter series, Lord of the Rings, The Hunger Games, and The Great Gatsby continue to be made into films.
I will tell you God's truth. God's truth about myself.
Bollywood too has done the same. Sarachandra Chatterjee's Devdas has been made and remade several times by filmmakers with their own interpretation of the story.
जब मैं खुद को दोषी पाऊंगा, मैं आऊंगा। और कहाँ जाऊंगा?
Beer है?
Parinitha, Makbool, Omkara, Three Idiots, and the more recent Two States are all adaptations of novels and popular books.
उस पे दिल आ गया मेरा मुझे रोज फॉलो करते रहता है then I just want to kiss you.
Even regional cinema in India has resorted to book adaptations. Are writers running out of original story ideas, or is adapting something that already has a fan base a sure-shot way to send the cash registers ringing? Or do film adaptations shine light back on some popular novels that might have been forgotten? These are the questions we're asking today.
All right, so our conversation is on books being made into film. You can join in on the conversation, log into IndiaPostLive.com. You can also send in your tweets, hashtag IndiaPostLive, @IndiaPostLive. So I'm going to be waiting for your tweets, and I'm going to be waiting for your calls on Google Chat, Google Hangout, or Skype, and we are going to be having a conversation. Right now with me in the studio, I have Shoibal Chatterjee, renowned film critic. He has also won a national award for the best film critic in 2003. Shoibalda, welcome to the show. I also have with me Shantanu Roy Chaudhary, who is managing editor of HarperCollins. Thank you so much for joining on the conversation. I'm also waiting for all of you to join, and we can have a conversation on films that are adaptations of popular books. My first question to you, are we becoming lazy? I don't want to read a book. I don't want to spend a couple of weeks, a week, even 2 days reading a book. Might as well spend 2.5 hours and watch the film.
Yeah, obviously. I mean, watching a film is much easier. It requires less time. You have to invest less effort. Reading a book obviously needs more concentration. When you watch a film, you go into a movie hall, buy your ticket, and watch the film, and be done with it. But I guess books will always be made into films because and particularly good literature will always be made into films because cinema needs stories that are rooted in the reality of the time that those films are being made in. And so I don't think there's anything wrong. I mean, I'm a filmmaker. When I read a book, I'm already imagining what it would be like if I watch it on the screen. Okay. So even though I'm not a filmmaker, every human being has a tendency to visualize. When you read the Ramayana, for instance, or somebody narrates a Ramayana to you, you have your own concept of what Ram would be like. Until Ramanand Sagar came and made Ramayana and gave it to us on television, and all our Rams have become one.
The Rams have become Arun Govil.
Yeah, that's right. So I guess the harm that cinema does when it adapts a book is that it sort of standardizes, the visual possibilities that a book has until it's made into a film.
Right. You know, yes, you were
Yeah, and
saying.
also it's not so much as becoming lazy. I think also the fact is that cinema is a totally new medium, and what it is doing to a novel is totally almost independent of the content of the novel. It just takes the idea, and it cannot be very true to the novel if it's got to be interesting, if it's got to reach out. So I think it's not so much as we are becoming lazy, but that an adaptation to a film just makes for a new medium altogether.
But are people reading really? I mean, don't the number of readers per se, you as a...
I think as coming from the publisher's point
Yes,
of view,
yes.
I think we are reading. It's. I have been hearing this story about reading going out of fashion, or newspapers going out of fashion for years now. It's almost 10 years that I've been, and now the big thing is e-books and all. Just like.
Yes.
But I think we are still publishing in India. I think it'll take at least another 15 years before we reach a level of technological advancement where we don't need books anymore, and everything becomes PDFs and on computers. So, and we are reading our books. Our sales do say that we are reading a lot of, and in fact, India is the world's largest market for non-fiction, which
Says a lot.
which says a lot. We don't read fiction as much as we read non-fiction. The best-selling books are non-fiction books, so we are obviously reading a lot.
See, definitely cinema is a very different medium. But, when I'm reading a book, for example, if I'm reading a story, I become one of the characters in my head.
That's
and
right.
I'm looking at other characters from my point of view, and I try to, there is a sort of blending that's happening with what the writer has written about the character, my own personality, and I get into that world. When I'm watching the same thing on film, on a big screen, it's like a projection, but I'm nowhere in it.
No, but it depends on who the filmmaker is. I mean,
Okay.
if you watch a Tarkovsky film, I mean, he's not giving you, details of the story in black and white, or in absolutes. So, it's not wall-to-wall carpeting as I normally describe it as. I mean, there's room for you to maneuver through it and find your own space in it. I mean, obviously, it won't be like reading a book, because reading a book, there's no visual support. So you can imagine whatever you want to and put yourself wherever you want to. But if you're watching a good adaptation, or watching a good film, might not be an adaptation, a good filmmaker will actually invite the viewer into his film.
Absolutely.
Instead of these Hollywood films that we watch,
Yes.
where there's no room for the audience to get into. You are just a consumer. You're outside
You're
the world
outside,
of the film.
exactly.
But for me, I mean, I'm an old school film watcher. I watch a Tarkovsky, and he lets me enter his world. A Bergman will let me enter his world and imagine things. I mean, when I watch a knight playing chess with death, I mean, it's obviously what you call magic realism. Before magic, the term was
Marquez.
coined. So, a good filmmaker, good storyteller will invariably allow the reader or the film watcher to become a part of the world that he or she is creating. An ordinary writer will only give you black and white truth, what they perceive as the truth, and lies. So you don't have any room to maneuver through that world. I mean,
But do you think a film can actually capture the imagery that a book can? Because a film cinema has its constraints. It has
is.
constraints of time.
Right.
It
That's
has
the
constraints
biggest
of
constraint. You cannot, for example, take this Zhivago, Dr. Zhivago. If you look at the novel, it's almost 800 pages,
Right.
and it goes through the expanse that it goes through. If you were to film it, it would probably require 26-hour-long episodes. Even that wouldn't film all of it. So, and when David Lean adapts it, so he just takes certain highlights out of the book and weaves. So, of course, there are little nitty-gritties that go missing, but the filmmaker's craft comes into play when you see the film and you get a sense of the history of of the time, of the place, of the milieu of the original book. If you get that, which Dr. Zhivago does, which probably Bimal Roy's adaptation of Devdas does, so you come back with a lot of that. Of course, even for example, Pother Pachali, as we were talking about, full of, it's got about 300 characters who have a role to play in the book. In the film, there are barely 5 or 7 who have that sort of presence. So obviously you are losing out on 290 characters, but at the end of the thing, the film is as great a work of art as the book itself.
Because ultimately, it's not the filmmaker's job to do a completely faithful, transliteration of a written work, because that's not possible. It's just not humanly possible, because these are two different works.
But then every time we read stories of how authors are disgruntled, filmmaker spat. So when the author is giving away the right to the book, the author should probably also realize that it is not possible. Don't you think?
No, today in
Hollywood.
Today in Hollywood,
yeah.
Even before a book is published, it's optioned to a film studio, which means that a film studio says, when this book comes out, we will have a look at it and decide whether we can make a film, and then you have the right of whatever first refusal. I mean, so you can.
That's happening increasingly in India also.
So you option it, and the contract will say upfront that the filmmaker will retain the liberty to work with this idea, not actually do a faithful adaptation.
So we've had cases where, for example, the writer of Forrest Gump, Winston Groom, he was extremely unhappy with the way the film was made, even though the film went on to win so many awards. And unfortunately, his name was not even mentioned at any of the ceremonies. And then they went on to claim that they did not really make profits of it. So there was a 3% contract, which ultimately also did not work out. But you're saying that is changing, the technicalities.
Yeah, but closer home, Chetan Bhagat had a huge problem with Vidhu Vinod Chopra.
Three Idiots.
Three Idiots. I mean, his name was right at the end, in the the end credits, which nobody watches when the film ends. You walk out.
We all get up and walk out.
And also because it was an entirely
take.
It's an entirely different take. There's unless you are actually told that okay, this is an adaptation of 5 Point Someone, you wouldn't know that Three Idiots is based on that, because Raju Hirani just spins a different tale altogether to the.
Absolutely. Yeah.
And not so famously, Paul Zakaria was a very well-known Malayalam writer. His story was adapted by Adur Gopalakrishnan, who's a master, and they had a running battle after the film was made, Vidayan.
Yes.
And Adur was hard pressed to tell the world that I'm a filmmaker, I'm not a writer, I'm working with images, the writer works with words. And that's, when you're using images, you can't be doing exactly what words are meant to do.
Right.
You will use images to convey the story.
It's a different medium altogether.
Which is what happened with Ray also, when he made, for example, we talked about Pratidwandi, we talked about Oranye Din Ratri. Sunil Ganguly's characters were all street boys, roadside boys who had no jobs, almost the lumpen youth. And when Ray adapted it, he brought it to this upwardly mobile class, because I guess Ray identified with that class more than he did with the lumpen class. And Sunil Ganguly was very upset, though at the end of it he did acknowledge that it was a classy act, the film was a class by itself, but he was upset with the fact that you have changed the whole understanding of characters that I had in the original.
Shantanu, we have a caller on Google Chat. Gyan Tiwari has joined us. Gyan, welcome to the conversation. Can you hear me?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, I can hear you.
Gyan, my first question, have you read Two States and have you seen Two States?
Yeah, I have read the book Two States and seen the movie too.
All right, great. Let's have a critical analysis from you, because I do know what Mr. Shoibal Chatterjee has talked. We will get talk about that with him, of course. But what have you to say about Two States?
If we talk about the novel Two States by Chetan Bhagat, the film was basically a screenplay. And now, if we come to the movie point, the film was certainly adapted screenplay of the book. Basically, many points. Taking experiments, taking things onto the other side. So there was a basic difference between the book and the movie.
Okay. Did you like the book? Did you like the movie?
I like the book most.
You like the book. You like the book more. All
Yeah.
right, all right. Stay with us. I'm going to talk to Shoibalda about it. You have trashed the film virtually,
I mean, I haven't actually trashed it. I gave it 2.5 stars, which is not bad.
which is not actually not
50%.
bad. Yes.
I mean,
But you said that it lacks the energy, it lacks
and
the depth.
yeah, but I would disagree with Gyan because I think the starting point of the film is not that great because it's a sort of very cliched, ordinary story. I mean, these are stories that these are things that we discuss among friends. You know, the differences between sambar and paneer, paneer masala or butter chicken. I mean, those are so. When you turn that into a story, you're not actually telling me anything that I don't already know.
Right.
Okay, so now when you're making a film about that, obviously the film also doesn't have any depth. It's only sort of skimming the surface of this whole issue. Because in a country like ours, where there are 22 scheduled languages and we have 29 states and we have hundreds of dialects being spoken, I mean, these differences do exist and they do lead to problems. And particularly when two people decide to marry each other because you're marrying two families. But the issues, the socio-cultural issues, are far more complicated than what either the book or the film are able to sort of convey.
Shantanu, Gyan liked the book. Let's start from there. Chetan Bhagat has actually catered to young India and he has encouraged young India to read, go back to reading. In fact, we were talking, you are saying that, India is reading, which is a very heartening thing. But I still believe that, no matter what, let's not get into the depth of his writing, but he has brought in many more young people to bookstores.
Absolutely, that goes without saying. This is something I have discussed with people at work and all.
Yes.
We may not agree. It's not writing. It may not be. That's also debatable. I am coming in as a judgmental thing there, but
Yes.
But there is no denying the fact that his writing has reached people who would probably not have read in English before. And that has contributed a lot to the growing number of people who are reading in English now. And of those 100 people who wouldn't probably have read and who are reading because Chetan writes in a language that is accessible, in a
Simple.
which is simple.
The
which
vocabulary
is, not
is very
simple.
simple.
It does not involve too complex issues. He sort of brings it down to the lowest common denominator as far as issues are concerned.
Right.
So by doing that, he has actually brought in a huge number of people to read in English. And if out of those 100 who are now reading in English, if even 20 people go on to read something that's better, more complex, if they move from Chetan Bhagat to Tolstoy or Dickens, that's also, if 20 of them move.
Let's
reading,
ask Gyan that question. Gyan, are you still with us?
Yeah.
Okay, Gyan, what Shantanu Roy Chaudhary pointed out, that if 100 people get hooked on to Chetan Bhagat's books because of his simplistic style of writing and Indian English, as it were, would you be one of those people who would then move on to more complex literature and better classics?
I do agree with him.
Sorry, I didn't hear you. Once again, please. You agree?
I do
Okay.
agree with him.
Okay. So you're saying
Yeah,
that.
I do agree with him, but there's a point I need to mention.
Sure. I think we are having a bit of an audio connectivity problem with Gyan.
Two points
Yeah.
in this context.
Yeah.
One, of course, Ruskin Bond once told me, I asked him a question about, this was like some 15 years ago, about children not reading anymore. He said that's not true. He said, even in my time, Ruskin Bond's time, I'm not talking about my time, even in his time, there were kids who read and kids who didn't read. Okay, some kids who played football and some kids
Now
who read.
kids are playing PSP probably.
Yeah, so no, even today there are people who are playing PSP, kids
And
who are reading.
kids who are reading, right.
So maybe the percentages might have changed a little bit, but that has been the case all along. In my time, we would read James Hadley Chase, Harold Robbins, and those were simple, those were thrillers, those were things that we saw on the screen, in Hollywood films, and we related to them. But we also went and read Tolstoy, we read Charles Dickens, and those were more complex. Those required you to understand history, the history of England, and the history of London, the history of...
What Chetan Bhagat has also done is, if you look at him, he picks up issues which appeal, which are very common issues. If it's 5 Point Someone, it's just a group of college students.
Pressure, academic pressure.
Yeah. Or two states in a country like India, two people from different languages and backgrounds marrying. Or the other one where 3 Mistakes of My Life, he brings in. So he is actually catering to subjects that are
People
topical,
can identify with?
topical, which are discussed every day, and he is doing that in a very simple way. So that is
In a
very
superficial way, would you
very,
say?
very superficial. It doesn't go beyond.
The other thing that's happening is, these are just a few stories that India has.
Right.
Yeah.
There are thousands. No country in the world has as many stories as India does.
And also, it's a
but where are
media
those
thing.
stories? Where are those stories? I mean, why don't filmmakers in Bombay pick, say, a writer who's writing in Chhattisgarh about the situation there? There are lots of great writers writing in there.
I wanted to talk about that.
The tragedy
Yes.
is that a
Saleable.
writer like Manu Joseph, who actually does 2 brilliant books, says Serious Men and Illicit Happiness. Illicit Happiness is one of the finest that has come out in recent times. But we are sort of stuck at Chetan Bhagat and his numbers, We don't seem to
and
We are not taking a risk, are we?
And Amish Tripathi.
Amish Tripathi.
Because that also is very popular and
the
people read,
mythology, yes.
kids read.
Yes.
So
Okay, I have another caller, Damini Berry. Damini is a film buff. She blogs on films. Damini, welcome to the conversation. Can you hear me? Hi. Hi. Okay, I'm Nilanjana. We have Shoibal Chatterjee, film critic, and there is Shantanu Roy Chaudhary, managing editor of HarperCollins.
Hello.
Okay, we were talking about books made into film. What is your first impression? Are books better? Are the books always better?
I'm an English graduate. I'm an English honors graduate. So for me, books precede everything in life. So obviously, I can't answer that question without being biased.
Right.
So books any day are better. But yes, I do have my other friends as well. Obviously, being a film buff, obviously I keep talking to lots of my other friends as well.
Yes.
And I keep getting their opinion as well. What do they think? So it's a two-way street. Some people like that, some people don't like that. Some people like the book, and that's why they see the film. Some people like the film, that's why they read the book. So
That's
it's
a very
two-way
interesting
street, but
point.
for me, it's books.
Damini, let me just bring in a very interesting point. What you just talked about. In fact, John le Carre, the one who wrote Tinker Tailor Soldier Spy, he has said that cinema is another medium altogether. If people are getting access to my stories through another medium, it's fine with me, and it is a bonus for me if those people watch the film and then go buy the book. So, Damini, you raised a very interesting point. Let me ask, you first, Shantanu. Do you think many people have actually gone in and bought a book after watching a film?
I think so.
Do you think film has actually done that kind of service to books?
Particularly in cases where books have been there for quite some time. Say, for example, Parinita.
Yes.
Which was, I know that because at that point of time I was in Penguin, and the film came out, and we had Parinita is one of his lesser known works. It's nowhere in the league of any of the other well known. But the moment the film came out, Penguin went into doing a translation and launching the translation. Unthinkable at that point of time. Yes. I was scandalized to see Parinita having cover of Saif Ali and Vidya Balan, Sharat Chandra's Parinita.
Well, that's very common in the West. I mean, a lot of books come out with the film star playing the character on the cover. I mean, it's
Yeah.
very common, and they will say on the cover itself, now
A major motion
major
picture.
motion picture.
So that happened.
Which is a selling
And
point.
I know for a fact that Parinita, the translation sold out very well. So that it brought in readership to the book. The film did that.
You know what? Something similar. I mean, what John Locke said. Mohsin Hamid, after The Reluctant Fundamentalist, has said something similar. He said, I mean, when I gave my book to Meera Nair to make, I mean, I knew that it wouldn't be entirely my story, the story that I wrote, because it's a film.
As long as authors understand that, as long as authors are okay with that and they understand the limitations of film, then it's fine. But you know, we've had so many instances. I'm going back to that. Damini, stay with us. I'm going to talk to you about that as well. We've had so many instances where, for example, Stephen King, he was very upset with the way Kubrick made The Shining. You had this woman, Pamela Travers. She cried when Mary Poppins was released.
Yeah, for that matter,
She
even
didn't
R.K.
give
Narayan.
Yes, let's come back closer home. R.K.
Guide. He never went back to another filmmaker with any book, or with any of his book, because he was sort of devastated with what, particularly the English version, the Hindi version that Devanand and Vijayanand subsequently did. They started shooting parallelly, but then something cropped up, and the English version sort of took the story from Malgudi to Rajasthan and introduced snake dances and snake charmers and all of that. And this was a project that was green-lighted by Pearl Buck, you know, who herself is an author and who should know what.
She wrote the script.
She wrote the
in
script.
The English script.
And
So you're saying sometimes they get lost in translation.
Absolutely. But in
all the examples, Mary Poppins, The Shining, the films have outlived the books.
One Flew Over the Cuckoo's
The films have outlived the books.
Books, yeah.
You know, I mean, very few people in India would even know that R.K. Narayan was the writer of
Guide.
the story that was turned
But
into
we
the
remember
film.
all the songs of the film.
I mean, so the
We
films
remember
become a
the
classic,
film.
and because the power of cinema, the power of the moving image, is far greater than the written word. The written word requires effort. You have to actually sit in your little room in a corner and read, shut yourself out from the world.
Yes.
Whereas cinema watching is a communal event. So it becomes far more exciting.
And
Tolkien
grand.
also, the three films.
So
I'll quickly get Damini's reaction on that. Damini, you've been hearing us talk about, you know, authors being unhappy. What is your take on that?
Actually, I'm right now I'm reading a book called Filming Fiction. I'm sure everyone is aware of that, Filming Fiction. And interestingly, even in that also, I read about how there are two ways film theorists are divided on this opinion. Like they think that no, it's a crime to make a transfer a book into a film. Okay, and then there are some that who think that there are certain books that have that quality of visual appeal that can be translated into a film. Okay, so yes, I think that there are certain books only that have a quality to be transformed into a film. Not all of them, because at times, you know, you feel so sad to see the way that they turn out. Being a literature student, obviously someone who has read the book before it is on screen.
It can actually depress you. Yes.
It depresses me. It depresses all the literature students around me. I know that because the millions of Othello versions that we used to go for and Shakespeare adaptations we used to go for, half of the time we were just holding our heads and were thinking, why did they ever do that?
Right.
So,
Where does one draw the line, Damini, according to you? Where does one draw the line? What are the books that should not be made into films? And how does one decide that really?
I think that, okay, fine, I'm speechless over here.
Yes.
Because I don't know where to draw the line. Obviously, when I see it, I think it's certain filmmakers. I think I will leave it on the filmmakers. Certain filmmakers have a quality to draw the essence out of a book. Certain actually don't, especially in India. And in India, there's so much of literature, but so little of them get transferred into screen. And there's so much literature we have. Not just classics, not just Rabindranath Tagore and Premchand. There's so many new authors that are coming up. And such little compared to the West, I'm saying.
Right.
So yeah, I
We have a
can't
huge
bother.
wealth, you're saying. We have a
No,
huge
but can I,
wealth of...
can I see?
Yeah.
But when Damini is saying this, she's obviously thinking of Hindi cinema primarily.
Primarily.
But a lot of work is happening in Malayalam, in Bengali. In
Regional-
Bengali,
regional-
most films, the non-mainstream films, I'm not talking about the commercial films, are based on literary works. In Kerala, most, a lot of, if not most, a lot of films are based on literary works. So it's only in Hindi, which also in the golden age of Hindi cinema,
Yes.
Munshi Premchand,
Why
and even
can't we
even
have-
Chekhov.
Why can't we have a Hollywood film made out of a novel which has won a Sahitya Academy Award?
Bollywood film.
A Bollywood film?
Because our cinema is escapist. We don't want to be hemmed in by reality. No, we have to give our viewer
A fantasy.
a fantasy. So Two States, despite being the story of a real person's life,
Yes.
it's in a sense fantasy. As I said, I mean, which right-thinking young woman would tolerate a mother-in-law who's that obnoxious as the woman in the film
In
or in the
today's
book? Yeah,
context.
I mean, no woman would. I find maybe, even 15 years ago, I mean, I don't think any girl
Educated.
worse assault
Yes.
would take that kind of shit
Right.
from anybody.
All right. Gyan, are you still with us? And Gyan, can I please, can you hear us?
Yes, I can hear you.
All right, all right. The audio seems to be better. Okay, you've been listening to the conversation. What is your take? I mean, don't you think that on one hand, it is a huge risk for the author to put his work out there for a filmmaker to interpret it his way and make a film out of it? But don't you think it is equally difficult for a filmmaker?
Being a writer, it is it is actually different for filmmaker. It is actually different for filmmaker to make such subjects.
All right. No, you're saying it's a bigger risk for who? The author or the filmmaker?
I think it's the filmmaker.
That's a bigger risk for because I would like to raise one point here. For the author, let me ask you this question. For an author, one edition of a book is about 1,000 copies.
About 3,000 to begin with.
3,000 to begin with.
And
now, when an adaptation of his work is going out there in the cinema, you have each show in one hall is equivalent to an edition?
yeah.
Yeah?
Yeah.
So the kind of, if you magnify the numbers in one city, you have so many multiplexes and so many shows. So, the work of that author is actually going out to so many
Absolutely.
people, albeit in a
Yeah,
not
but
so...
I mean, correct me if I'm wrong.
Yes.
In India, a bestseller is a book that sells 3,000 copies, 5,000 copies,
5,000 to
at 10,000
10,000.
copies. If it's 10,000, like you've really arrived. You're like really big. You're a star.
yeah.
In the West, 1 million
Yes.
is the bare minimum that you need to sell. It could be 2, it could be 3 millions. So if there's a writer who's already made money, and then a Hollywood studio comes to him and pays him some more. And
Yeah.
quite a lot more.
So the author is the winner.
So the author is the winner. He doesn't mind. I mean, you take my book. My book has made money. I've got the I've got it out into the market. I've got what I wanted, and now you make a film.
Yeah.
And if that adds a few more copies to my sales, so be it.
Yeah,
Absolutely.
that's
in
exactly what
fact,
Huh.
in fact, it does add to the sales of a book, and it's like, for example, Q&A, Vikas Swarup's book, wouldn't have
Nobody
been
knew about the book until we saw Slumdog
Slumdog
Millionaire.
Millionaire.
It's only because of Slumdog Millionaire that it reached a certain level of sales. And there also, I think the risk was with the filmmaker, because the risk is always primarily with a filmmaker, because the
Essentially
author,
the costs
the
also.
cost. The author can start off on a piece of paper and a pen or a screen of computer. It's much cheaper. He doesn't have to invest anything.
Right,
Just
right.
invest his time.
So bigger risk for a filmmaker. We are asking you this question, Damini. Final comments from you. Damini, are you there? Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay. Okay, so we all basically agree that the risk is bigger for a filmmaker, and the author is anyway a winner, even if his film gets made into a film, no matter how bad the film is. It might not be what he wanted, but the author is actually a winner, both financially and creatively. Final comments from you, Damini.
I would like to say that, there is a need for, careful selection of what kind of films. Even though we say that maybe the risk is with the filmmaker, I say he's getting a made narrative. He's getting a made narrative over there. It's all prepared. It's better than putting up a rowdy Rathore on screen anytime than then pick up a book. I'm sorry for the movie references over there, but I
That's
think
all
that
right.
is one example we can say.
Very well
Okay, so
put.
that's the type I'm saying.
All
Okay,
right.
so he's getting a made narrative.
All right.
So I think it's both the ways. The selectiveness has to be there with the filmmaker. The sensibility can't be, drawn out of something. It has to be there.
All right.
So
So the
he's not that
maturity,
much blame free.
so the maturity of the filmmaker, the sensitivity of the filmmaker is very important in terms of final comments from you, book to film.
I mean, there have
Where
been
do you see-
writers, there have been
yes.
filmmakers in India. If we are talking about India, Govind Nihalani, Gulzar,
Yes.
Hindi filmmakers who work in Bombay,
Yes.
who've always worked with books. You know, and they've put their stamp on the story. They've never lifted straight because that would be very boring. One, and two, they are taking a book because they like the book, but they're also taking it because they want to turn it into something they like.
Right.
Okay,
right.
so you have
The
to give
stamp of the filmmaker.
yeah, so you have to
obviously
give the
has to be-
filmmaker that leeway. You can't say
Right.
no.
At the
Now
end
you
of
have to
it,
follow
it
every
says
line in
a
the book.
film by Gulzar or a film by. So
Yes.
it's his.
And in any case, a description in a book might be over 3 pages. In a film, it could be a second of film,
Yes.
and it could convey the same.
A picture speak 1,000 words.
Yeah, same
Yes.
same emotion.
Right.
Where you would need you would need 3 pages to describe an emotion, which a film can do in a split second.
So Shantanu, you're basically also saying that readership is not really going down, and probably
absolutely
it is helping. Like you said, the Vikas Swaroop's Q&A
Yeah.
actually picked up once Slumdog Millionaire.
happened, yeah.
Films like Parinita picked up once Parinita released. All right, that's all we have time for on this conversation. Damini, thank you for joining us. Gyan, thank you for joining us. There was a bit of an audio problem with your conversation, but your inputs were well taken and appreciated. Thank you so much. I would like to thank Shoaib Alda for coming in on the conversation. Shantanu, of course, thank you so much. Take care. We shall see you again soon.